So, with the release of the new Ahsoka Tano series, the debate over the depiction of clone troopers on screen has emerged yet again, and it's quite an interesting one. Is there any point to using actual people in suits when you can just, well, computer generate them? What are the benefits of both of these approaches? And what does the Star Wars community think about all this, and what are the talking points online? Well, let's find out. Star Wars has represented clone troopers in CGI as led us in the Book of Boba Fett. That moment with the flashback sequence in Grogu is actually pretty interesting and is also a testament of how far CGI has gotten, since, well, many people to this day believe that these guys over here are actual people in suits, and they are not. Only later that year when the Kenobi series came out were we able to finally see the difference between live-action suits and the computer-generated ones, and so now we're able to make any type of comparison. But why make a comparison in the first place? CGI or live action? Doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, let's get into the points of discussion.
Some people are complaining that the clone troopers in the flashbacks in Ahsoka don't look real, and that the CGI is a lot worse than it was way back in 2002 when clone troopers first stepped onto our screens in Attack of the Clones. But as far as I can tell watching the Ahsoka footage, most, if not all of the clones are actually real.
Clone troopers in Ahsoka don't look realistic. The people that made this argument are a bit confused, so there isn't much to discuss. In their defense, I will reword their claim into what I think they actually meant. So now we got this. The clone troopers in Ahsoka look off. Or strange. There, that's better. Now we actually have something valid to discuss. These points can emerge when people compare the CGI prequel clones to the live-action ones we've seen in Ahsoka, Andor, and the Obi-Wan series. The following are usually the talking points I see online. Let's see what people say and then we'll discuss it. The Phase 1 clone trooper helmets seem to be wider down the bottom compared to the ones we see in Episode 2. By the way, this is mostly unavoidable if you want to fit an actual human head inside. Point number 2. The armor is shinier, like Stormtrooper glossy level shiny. This can stand out as the clones in Episode 2 had more of a matte texture that scattered light, making it look softer here. Point number 3. The armor that they wear looks considerably thinner compared to what we see in the CGI clones in the prequels. And point number 4. The clone troopers are at different heights. Now these are the main talking points I've seen. There are a couple more, but these are the key ones. Now, is the aforementioned an issue for me personally? Not really. Does it take some people out of the show because at this point we're almost hardwired to see clones in a different way from 20 years ago? Well, perhaps. I'd say that in Ahsoka show specifically, the job is done better with live-action clones than in some earlier shows like Andor. For example, it really ruins the immersion when the clones are different heights, as they're meant to be invariable and aligned when standing next to each other. What I noticed in the Ahsoka show is that in a lot of the scenes we see them in, they are far away apart from each other so that their height and body structure doesn't stand out at all. This was perhaps intentional as they were aware of the issue. As for the helmets being wider, well, it's probably intentional to mix their look with the Clone Wars style a little bit more, since in that TV show that was their more standout feature. An argument can be made that it's made in order to be, well, practical and to fit the helmet on one's head, because the ones we see in Episode 2 aren't quite practical to put on. If you for example, 3D print them one-to-one, it'll be almost impossible for the majority of people to put them on. However, I do know that it's possible to make Clone Trooper Phase 1 armor look almost identical to the CG models that we've seen in Episode 2. For example, here's a cosplay made by Odd Viking. If we compare it to the CGI model, you can see that the proportions are almost perfect, even for the helmet. So it is possible to replicate the CGI look if they really wanted to. As for the armor shininess, well, I'm not sure what to say, aside from that it was also the case in the Kenobi series, and it was the first giveaway that the clones there were actual people in suits. Plus, they had a lot of a less worn look to them if you compare them to the Revenge of the Sith models or the ones we see in the Book of Boba Fett. And speaking of which, the way they are rendered in the Book of Boba Fett, the clones still maintain that matte texture to them, just like in the Revenge of the Sith and in the Attack of the Clones. Hence why I think they look so perfect there, because they look almost identical to how we're used to seeing them, plus modern rendering techniques help them look even more real. Granted, it's possible that the armor looks more matte in the prequels because rendering so many reflective objects would have been too costly, hence why in Episode 2, for example, reflective materials are only limited to the visors. Another aspect you don't really notice but your brain does is the armor thickness. If you look in the images of the clone troopers rendered in Episode 2 and 3, you can see that the armor thickness is pretty up there, like while in the live-action TV series, their armor is as thin as Stormtrooper armor. Why is it so thin? Well, the only way thick armor would be viable is if you had a lot of thing actors for them, which again is a big problem for the casting department. Hence why I think they stuck to smaller thickness for their armor. It's also probably easier to wear in some aspects as well. So, why does this debate exist? In a nutshell, some people just think that something is different when they see it, but they can't really point out what it is exactly, so they'll say weird stuff like, oh, the CGI clones in the Ahsoka series looks bad, when no CGI in reality was used for the armor whatsoever. Granted, seeing clones in live action is great, but it can put some people off for reasons mentioned above. So may CGI clones be superior to live action ones? Well, let's see why the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas himself, did it. The reasons can be summarized as follows. Number 1, no need to produce anything physical. Number 2, it solves the issue of casting people with the same height and build. Number 3, pushing the limits of CGI in full George Lucas style. Again, to this day there are plenty of people out there who have no idea that these are not actual people in suits. And number 4, lighting in real time. Like this scene here, since it's entirely CGI, getting the blaster shot effects flying through and illuminating the clones is a lot easier and accurate compared to if you, say, do it in post over real people. Having them CGI also makes it easier to do stunts and falls without breaking anything physical, something you don't think about when you watch the film, and there are a lot of such moments in the movies, like this poor guy. Either way, this just about wraps up the video. I think all the arguments I've seen discussed online I've covered fairly, and I wonder what you guys think about this whole debate. Should Disney have stuck with CGI for clones, or is practical equally a good approach and the small downsides aren't that important? Let me know what you all think in the comments down below, and I'd love to know more. Either way, until next time everyone.